Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon, and I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today, we're covering the year 1998, as requested by our special guest, our very special guest, Kevin Ford. So excited to have our old podcasting buddy, my partner in Flooping the Pig. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. Longtime fan, first-time caller. Happy to be here.
We're glad you called in. Jake, how are you?
I am fantastic. Really enjoying my day and really excited to talk about these two movies in particular.
Before we get into the movies, Kevin, when we asked you to be a guest on the show, we asked you what year you wanted to do, and you said 1998. Why did you pick that?
So I hate to break it to you, but you're not the only movie podcast I listen to.
I would hope so.
And I think you've even mentioned Blank Check before on your Coen Brothers countdown.
I love Blank Check.
Yeah, so I discovered them when they did their Fincher episodes in the fall, and I went back to see, I was like, oh, what other movies or guests have they had on that I might want to see? And I saw they had Kevin Smith on to talk about A Simple Plan. My brother, I have an older brother who introduced me to Kevin Smith when I was like 13, 14, which is like perfect time to get into Kevin Smith. And while I don't really like his input after like I pretty much graduated from high school, I do still really like listening to him talk about movies, comics, and he brings very unique stories to this. You know, he talked about Simple Plan because he has a relationship with Jim Jacks, the producer. And so when Brad sent me the years and the movies that were with it, and I saw that A Simple Plan was on this as well, and I had not seen the other film we're talking about, I was like, great, I could see two movies I haven't seen, see this other movie that I was planning on watching anyways, and here we are.
I'm so relieved because when you picked 1998, the lineup was a little different. We hadn't finished our Walter Matthau series yet, and Odd Couple 2 was on here. And then once I finished the Walter Matthau project, I decided not to subject Jake to Odd Couple 2 because it's not very good, and switched it to Slums of Beverly Hills. I also like Kevin Smith as the guest on Blank Check. He recently did Die Hard for their John McTiernan series because of his relationship to that series, because he's been in a Die Hard movie. He's had a bad relationship with Bruce Willis. So it was interesting to hear him talk about that. So yeah, check those out. He's good as like a pundit. And he's usually like really positive, which is fun. And you don't have to watch his movies. Let's start with Slums of Beverly Hills. Jake, oh no, I gave you. Okay, so yeah, like I said.
Yeah, tell me when to assign this one.
Right. So I had originally given you Odd Couple 2, like I said. And then I was looking for a replacement for it. We could have still done it, but I didn't think there was much to talk about because it's I mean, we could have just like talked for a while about the Odd Couple also, but that's kind of cheating. A couple weeks ago, we did an episode that no one listened to on The Savages, which you had requested I watch. And that was also directed by Tamara Jenkins. And she's only directed 3 films, and this was the first film that she directed. And I really like it, and my sisters were obsessed with it growing up. When I told them that I watched it for the first time a few weeks ago, they didn't believe me. They were like, no, we made you watch that growing up. I'm like, well, I've never seen this before, and I would be mortified to watch it with you. Yeah. There's a lot of nudity and sex in it, so no. And I just wanted to get y'all's take, and I'm glad that Kevin, you mentioned me, you'd also never seen this one. So that worked out. So real quick, Slums of Beverly Hills is sort of Natasha Lyonne's breakout. Although I was watching Dennis the Menace for the Walter Matthau series and noticed she's in that. And that came out before Slums of Beverly Hills. She's only in it for a minute. She plays a babysitter. So this was like her real breakout. It stars her, Marissa Tomei, Alan Arkin, David Krumholtz, and Carl Reiner, and Jessica Walter. And of course, we can't leave out, although I can't think of her name right now.
Rita Moreno.
Thank you.
And Kevin Corrigan.
Yeah, Rita Moreno.
And for such a small movie, the cast list is actually kind of insane.
It's really wild. Now, Rita Moreno was going through a time in her career when she wasn't doing as much, although around the same time, she was also a major star on the show Oz on HBO. So it wasn't like she was doing nothing. But a lot of these folks were past their prime, and it's about a family whose dad is sort of a sleazy con artist type, not a good father, and he moves the kids around a lot, and it's just 2 weeks in their lives while they take in their cousin who wants to go to nursing school but is also obsessed with some guy who we never really see. Kevin, we'll start with you. You're the guest. What'd you think of Slums of Beverly Hills?
Yeah, it was enjoyable. I mean, I don't know if slice of life is the right term, but it's just this look at this family and what they're going through in LA, and it was really enjoyable to watch. I mean, it's very much feels like a Natasha Lyonne vehicle. I mean, she's in basically like every scene in the movie except for a couple with Marissa Tomei. I do feel like if I was watching this, you know, I was 9 and 10 in 1998, I would have been blown away by some of the scenes, like the Marissa Tomei flashing the truck driver. And the vibrator scene is still so funny. It would take her so long to turn it off as Alan Arkin. It's just staring at her. So it's not like the most meaty movie, but it's just a really enjoyable watch. And I think there is sort of like two sides to the coin with this and A Simple Plan about like the feelings you have about your own life and being grateful for what you have rather than thinking about what you could be. And Natasha Lyonne ends this very positive note, while the other movie not so much. So I think watching these together was really cool in that aspect. I watched this after watching A Simple Plan. So I found it very funny, very enjoyable. It breezed right by, but just like fantastic performances from everybody. Like you said, it's a pretty banging cast.
I'm glad you got over the text that you sent me where you said I tricked you into watching a Jewish family movie.
I did. Yeah, I mean, maybe the most surprising thing is that the great Jewish actor John Turturro isn't in it, but pretty much perfect.
Or was he? What was he?
I know.
I was telling Jake the other day, we just saw that he's been cast. There's a new biopic coming out about Billy Wilder, which I'm really excited about, starring non-Jewish actor Christoph Waltz as the Jewish Billy Wilder and non-Jewish actor John Turturro as a Jewish writer.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Jake, what do you think of Slums of Beverly Hills?
I liked this movie a lot. We talked about, I was a big fan of the Savages, and I also, right after watching Slums of Beverly Hills, as you mentioned, Tamara Jenkins, she's only directed 3 films, and I watched her other film as well, Private Life, and I've liked all 3 of them. I think all are very good. So I did like Slums of Beverly Hills. Also for her first film, very, very strong, really well written. There's only really like 2 scenes in the movie that like really didn't work for me, and it really brought everything down, especially one really close to the end. Just because it's so close to the end, it kind of colored the rest of the movie for me. It's I don't know, can we spoil Slums of Beverly Hills?
Yeah, I think any pre-2000 movie is spoilable, and then after that we can debate.
Oh, geez, I would say pre-2020 movie is pretty spoilable at this point.
Right. It's the scene where Alan Arkin gropes Marissa Tomei when they're having their thing. I thought that was just so completely out of place and just kind of took away from everything else that they had done with the story. I don't think there was anything that like led to it. I don't think really anything came out of it. I don't think anything was like better in the movie for it. It just didn't feel like the right movie for that to happen.
So I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, we had to talk about it because it's such a weird scene. It actually does lead to the only real conflict at the climax of the movie, which is Natasha Lyonne's character in the bathroom at the airport where they're waiting for Marissa Tomei's father, who is the financial backbone of this extended family, and they're going to hit him up for more money. It causes this big conflict between the two of them where she blames Marissa Tomei for the awkwardness, putting it lightly. And it bothered me too, and it reminded me of the B.J. Novak movie that came out last year called Vengeance. Have either of you seen Vengeance?
Yeah.
Kevin shook his head no. So Vengeance is about B.J. Novak going to Texas because he stumbles upon a story that he thinks will be good for his podcasting career. It's a podcast movie. And there's all kinds of convoluted stuff that goes on in the movie about how like he doesn't really know the person that he's linked to down in Texas. All that's irrelevant for this conversation. What's relevant is as I'm watching it, I was like, everyone's pretty much getting along here, and it's a a dramatic drom-com, so to speak, but it's a comedy. So there has to be a point where there's a misunderstanding or someone comes clean about something and there's a dramatic conflict between them and a big argument between them. It happens in every comedy. And when I'm watching a comedy and I realize it hasn't happened, I'm like, oh, they have to shoehorn this in somehow, because there are no comedies anymore that don't have this argument near the end of the movie. And they did it in Vengeance at a Whataburger parking lot, and it kind of like the movie didn't work for me after that, really. And here it's this, and it's just weird that they made it be an incest story and so vile in a movie that wasn't really like going in that direction up to that point. It was pretty odd. What was the other scene that brought you down?
It was less so, but it was the scene where when they're in the restaurant, it's really early in the beginning where he's Alan Arkin's calling the waiter Jackson, and his kids are trying to explain to him why it's racist now.
I thought that was very funny.
I don't know. It didn't. It felt odd to me because I know what they were trying to establish. that he was old, but I don't think it was so important to establish to the audience that he was old. I thought it was more important, and they did a good job of establishing this later. It was more important to establish what the perception of his children thought of him, whether his kids thought he was old or not. Like of course the older children were like, obviously yes, our dad is old, but like the younger boy didn't quite didn't see him that way yet. And I don't know. I didn't really think like showing him as like an old, like using old racist terms was I don't know, didn't really do much. We kind of stuck out a little bit, but certainly not as much as like the later scene. It was just more like slightly awkward than totally tonally changing the film like the later scene did.
Did I make this up, or is there also a scene where someone asks Natasha Lyonne if that's her grandfather, and she's like, no, that's my dad?
No,
yes.
Several times.
So doesn't that kind of achieve the same thing without having to go there?
I think it's also a character thing for Alan Arkin, though. So I liked this scene in the diner. I mean, it made me uncomfortable, but I liked it because it establishes him also as bad. You know, he's old, and so he's using a gnarly racist term, but he also like doesn't care about the waiter at all. He's rude, and he knows it's racist. He knows he's like a bad dude. So I was okay with that. I liked that. I definitely agree with the second one. I also thought the flashback scene was kind of weird, and I didn't register right away that it was a flashback. Him remembering stabbing the guy or with a fork. I was like, wait, when is this happening? I mean, this could be just like user error on my part, but I was very confused by it.
Oh no, I thought that was a flashback right away.
I did like the payoff, and I like the all the kids had been like, oh, we've heard this a million times. You know, classic with your kids, with your dad. Like you hear this story, loves to tell all over again. So yeah, I like that a lot.
I thought Kevin Corrigan was the funniest part of this movie, kind of like by a big stretch, and I wasn't expecting it because while he's been in a lot of comedic stuff, probably more comedic stuff than dramatic, he's also like one of Scorsese's guys. It surprised me. Like he's in The Departed, he's in Goodfellas, and then he's just in this, being hilarious.
That's two things with Kevin Corrigan where period blood gets involved.
Oh,
somewhere where it's not supposed to be.
What's the other one?
Superbad.
Oh
yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Duh.
He's the villain in Superbad.
That's right.
I don't want to cut that out of the podcast. So don't make me look dumb.
It's not dumb.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember. Now I'm already blanking at it again. I can't remember the name of the woman from West Side Story.
That's my favorite part in Superbad too, is when they make Michael Cera sing.
Yes.
I think that's the part that makes me laugh the hardest in that movie. Yeah. I can't hear that song without like actually laughing out loud.
100%.
Jake, what did you think of Private Lives? Actually, now that we'll circle back to Slums of Beverly Hills, but I'm curious what your Tamara Jenkins rankings are now.
Yeah, I know you did yours a couple weeks ago. Private Life, I thought was like excellent, like really, really strong. Paul Giamatti was great in this. Catherine Hahn was great in this. Really interesting dynamic between them. The actress playing these two was terrific. I liked it almost as much as I like the Savages. I don't know, they're pretty close for me. I'd probably still put Savages in front. I'm a Philip Seymour Hoffman guy. So
but you're not a Paul Giamatti guy?
I'm both. You know, I mean, I had to be both. But I probably like the Savages a little bit more. But it's a pretty close 1 and 2 between Savages and Private Life, and then Slums would be number 3, but I mean, still 3 for 3, definitely. I mean, Slums is I've criticized it for those 2 scenes, but I mean, the rest of the movie, Slums of Beverly Hills, is like I said, I think really good. I think all the kids are really good, and Tasha Leone is really good in this. Krumholtz and the other brother, I think are really good. They're all, when the 3 of them are together, I think they're really good. Yeah, it's a very indie, like it's a very like prototypical indie type movie, but yeah, it's good.
I don't like all her movies in different ways. This one is like the quirky comedy. Savages is the depressing indie drama. And then Private Life is the modern, middle-aged, like, whoa, we haven't done anything.
Yeah.
Comedy, which we're seeing like Julie Louis-Dreyfus in a lot. And Jake Johnson is starting to veer into that a little bit too, even though he's quite a bit younger. Jake, when you texted me a couple of days ago, you don't think any of the nudity in this movie is actually attributable to the people who starred in the movie?
It seems so. It looked very obviously like neck down, different. I don't know. It seemed very like obviously like cut differently. I don't know. Yeah, I felt like it was body doubles.
I didn't give it that much thought, but I feel like sometimes some of the shots reminded me of, like, for some reason, like Raising Arizona, and even part of the movie reminded me, maybe it's because of Alan Arkin and stuff, but of Little Miss Sunshine. I got some vibes for both of those movies in there, but I didn't specifically, for some reason, that road scene with the flashing. I don't know. I didn't give it too much thought.
Krumholtz is so good in this. The dancing with his shirt off bit is really funny. Marin asked Krumholtz if this was his breakout, because this was sort of an indie darling when it came out. He was like, no, I was in the Santa Claus, man. That was my breakout. But my first exposure to Krumholtz is this movie called Life with Mikey with Michael J. Fox. Are either of you familiar with this movie?
I remember it. It feels like something I might have seen like as a kid when it came out, but I can't be sure.
I definitely have not seen it, but I for sure remember that film.
Yeah, I've probably seen it like 5 times. We watched it a lot when we were kids, but Michael J. Fox plays a child talent agent, and Krumholtz is his like established client, I think. And he finds this little girl in the Bronx and gets her to do a Girl Scout cookie commercial or something. That's like the whole movie. That's what I remember Krumholtz most from. But he's so beloved, and everyone seems to have like a different touch point with him. I bet a lot of people are Harold and Kumar people.
That's his first credit on IMDb is Life with Mikey.
Oh, is it? That's wild.
Yeah. Because I was trying to look up what I would have first known for. I guess Freaks and Geeks probably would have been mine. He's only in one episode of that. But,
yeah, I was going to say he's not in it much. That's a more of a Martin Starr situation. I think they're still good buds, those two, Krumholtz and Martin Starr.
Probably.
That's cool.
He's also in Superbad. What do you know?
Now I can't remember where Krumholtz is in Superbad. Is he in that room?
I think so, yes.
He's also These Eyes Have Seen a Lot of Love, but they've never seen the kind of love like they've had with you.
I just want to kind of offshoot on something you said, because I don't think there's going to be any other place for me to say this. It's as long as we're recommending kind of obscure Michael J. Fox films. I watched a film this past week, one that I hadn't seen since I was younger. My friend Sean and I used to watch this Michael J. Fox movie called The Hard Way a lot in high school. It stars Michael J. Fox is like a movie star who really wants to get this part as like a hardened detective, like cop sort of thing. So he wants to go undercover like with a real cop who is played by James Woods, who is just amazing in this. And it's just the two of them like hanging out for like 2 weeks, and James Woods is chasing this murderer, and Michael J. Fox gets all caught up in it. And hilarity ensues. It's one I watched a lot in high school, and I saw it in like a $5 sale on Vudu. So like, oh boy, is this going to hold up or not? It does. It holds up really well. Like, it's a really, really cool movie. It's called The Hard Way. It came out in 1991. If you like Michael J. Fox and want to see him in something besides, Back to the Future or, Spin City, it's a really fun movie.
So I'm looking at Michael J. Fox's filmography because Mike Tanzillo also recommended a Michael J. Fox movie a few weeks ago, probably Doc Hollywood.
Doc Hollywood. Yeah, that's one he recommended, which I really enjoy. Yeah.
And you own it on Vudu. Michael J. Fox is in a ton of movies I've never heard of, which is wild. Like, his career.
Very prolific.
Yeah, much more than I was like, oh yeah, he did his 2 TV shows, and he did Back to the Future and Teen Wolf and Life with Mikey, and that was his whole career to me.
I would say on a different note, it is cool seeing like sort of like this star for Natasha Lyonne, especially now that she's had, Poker Face and Orange is the New Black. I haven't watched a lot of those, but I recently became a big fan of Melanie Linsky because I watched that HBO show Togetherness that only lasted a couple seasons with the Duplass brothers. And I know she's gotten big from Yellow Jackets, and they're still friends, so they do a lot of like interviews and stuff together. So that was neat, getting a chance to see younger Natasha Lyonne. And I know they were in But I'm a Cheerleader and stuff like that too, but just really cool to see, watching it now, how far they come and how different their careers are and stuff.
It's funny how when you become familiar with an actor, that's sort of when they get frozen in time age-wise for you, because I was like, but Natasha Lyonne is so much younger than Melanie Linsky. That's probably not true. They're probably the same age. But for me, Melanie Linsky was introduced to me way later. Natasha Lyonne, I've always known. We had American Pie, of course. But her career sort of nosedived for a while when she had some drug issues, and then now she's back, and she's doing a very specific thing over and over and over again.
Well, seems to be working for her.
Yeah, Poker Face is like pretty solid. Let's go on to the main event. A Simple Plan. I have a lot to say about this movie and the movies of Sam Raimi. Jake, why did you give us A Simple Plan?
Because my memory of it is that it's awesome. I had it as my number 5 movie of 1998.
Spoiler alert. Jeez.
Oops, spoiler alert. Well, that was part of my reasoning for looking at it. I look at, the movies that you haven't seen, and like I look at my top, list of the year. It's like, all right, what are the great movies from the year they haven't seen? So, whoops, yeah, little spoiler for the top list. But, it ranked really highly on my end of year list. And, I remembered it being great. I know Sam Raimi is a pretty popular director, but I feel like, a lot of people maybe haven't seen, if they've seen a lot of Sam Raimi movies, maybe they haven't seen this one. It wasn't like exactly, it's not like a huge hit. It's not, I wouldn't say it, like a small thing either. It's not like a Me and Orson Welles for Linklater, which like nobody remembers. But yeah, and it's got Bill Paxton. I think Bill Paxton's amazing. I love Billy Bob Thornton. It's got a Bridget Fonda performance, which, we don't get those anymore. And yeah, I just thought it was really cool. And it was kind of an easy choice, actually, when I saw the movies, when I looked at 1998.
It's interesting. It was sort of a break even kind of movie. Like, it made back its budget, but wasn't a hit. I'd never seen it before, which I thought was interesting because we're big Coen Brothers fans, and this is the most Coen adjacent in style movie that he's made. He made a movie with the Coen Brothers, but it's awful. It's called Crime Wave. But yeah, I thought it was great. You want to tell us what it's about before we say what we think of it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's about a couple of brothers. Bill Paxton plays the younger brother, and they're Midwest. They live in Minnesota. They live in a small town. He works at like a feed and grain mill or whatever. He's got a nice job. He's got a nice wife who's pregnant. His older brother also lives in town, but he's a little more troubled. He's very he's socially awkward. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have an education. He hangs out with the town drunk, who is just a mess of a human being himself. But the brothers have a relationship. They're very different, but they love each other. And one day they're out in the woods with the two brothers, and their friend are out in the woods. woods and they discover a plane that had apparently crashed. They look in the plane and they find a bag, big duffel bag filled with I think it's just over $4 million. That's, of course, more money than they've ever seen in their life. They get excited about that. And of course, the two idiots want to keep it right away. And Bill Paxton tries to be a little more level-headed and decide like, okay, well, let's hang on to it for a little while first and see if anything comes up in the news. You see, if anybody's looking for it, then maybe we can keep it, sort of thing. And he wants to be the keeper of it. And everything kind of just snowballs from there. It becomes kind of a morality play after that. Like, what would you do? Would you turn this in or would you keep it? We find out what these people would do.
What did you think of it, Kevin?
I loved this movie. I'd never heard of it until you mentioned it. And I think with Sam Raimi, for a lot of people, it's, Evil Dead, Army of Darkness, then nothing till Spider-Man. But there's a lot in there that's missing, and this is one of them. And it doesn't really feel like a Sam Raimi piece. And I don't know, Brad, if you listened to that episode about A Simple Plan of Blank Check, but a lot of it has to do with, so Jim Jackson's the producer, and they apparently told him, like, hey, make sure you reel Sam Raimi in for a little bit of this. It's like, so why'd you have Sam Raimi on this movie if you didn't want to feel like a Raimi movie? Anyways.
But why? What was the answer?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think they really had an answer. I think maybe it jumped from director to director. Like, it was supposed to be like Ben Stiller was doing it, but I think there was some before him, and they just kind of landed on Sam Raimi. But yeah, there wasn't really like an answer to it, but I think it was just a project that got passed around and ended up in his lap. And you really don't even know it's a Sam Raimi movie until, at least for me, when Becky Ann Baker gets blown away.
I was going to say, there are only two shots in the movie that are Raimi shots, and the first is the fox going into the hen house, which sets up finding the plane. And then there's Nancy. Nancy is her name, right? Yeah. Well, the actress is Becky Ann Baker, but Nancy getting shot in the kitchen. I was like, oh, there it is. That's a Sam Raimi shot.
It's so hilarious to me. But anyways, yeah, I mean, it's just a great story about how you see these characters and how they're portrayed. And, you have this loving family who has a baby on the way, or this loving couple, and they're sort of like their brother and his friend who's a deadbeat. And the way that they view the characters totally changes. And it's just a lot of, like, you realize how judgmental they are. And there's like a little bit of like elitism going on with them, but then you realize that Jacob is so much smarter than they give him credit for. And he's such a great brother, obviously makes the ultimate sacrifice at the end, but just seeing how much this really corrupts Hank and Sarah throughout the whole movie, and how they're thinking one step ahead, and you feel like he's the more sensible person to keep this money and be the one to execute this plan, but in the reality it just spirals and he loses like everything in his life and ends up not even having the money. And that's sort of what I thought of when I watched Slums of Beverly Hills, is Natasha Lyonne sort of like accepts, like, maybe this isn't the perfect life, but I have a very loving family, and loving that for what it is, where once they get this money and see what their life could be, it totally consumes them. And then when all is said and done, they go back to the life they had. They don't even have the money anymore. They've lost he's lost his brother. They have these murders they're going to think about forever, and it just totally ruins them. It's really fantastic. I mean, just phenomenal performances from everybody. I mean, I think most people agree, and I think he got nominated, that Billy Bob Thornton really is the standout, and there's just some really fantastic scenes with him. Like, I know there's a couple like monologues people give credit for, but I really love the scene where he's sitting at the kitchen table with Hank, and he makes Hank realize that his dad committed suicide that Hank didn't know.
Oh, God.
That was so fantastic. So yeah, this is just a movie I had no expectations for, and ended up absolutely loving.
I'm starting to wonder first off, I also love this movie. It's my favorite Sam Raimi movie. I've now, as of this week, watched them all. I think I've been trying to think about, why would Raimi want to do this? I've also been trying to think, why would Raimi want to do a lot of the movies that he did in the 90s? Like, For the Love of the Game. I could not for the life of me figure out why he would want to do it. There are like no Sam Raimi shots in For the Love of the Game, maybe a couple of pitches, but it's one of the most boring movies I've ever seen. And it really just feels like Kevin Costner directed it. And I think in a way he probably did. It seems like he had a lot of creative control. But Raimi just likes baseball, so that's why he made For the Love of the Game. And it's a Detroit Tigers movie, and there aren't a lot of those. And this, my guess is, one, he wanted to be taken a little bit more seriously, and two, he's friends with the Coens, and this is kind of like his Fargo. It's a gothic Midwestern thriller. What he got to do in this movie, more than any other movie that he's made, is have really naturalistic performances from two incredible actors and an amazing supporting performance from Bridget Fonda, essentially playing Lady Macbeth, which I thought was so cool. At the beginning of the movie, you have Bill Paxton asking his wife, would you have done the bad things I just did? Because at the start of the movie, and again, we're spoiling everything, he thinks his brother, who you're led to believe is like pretty slow-witted, a troubled guy, as Jake said, the brother gets spooked and kills a farmer, or so he thinks. It turns out the farmer is alive and Bill Paxton has to finish the job. So he goes to his wife and he says, this is what I've done. He's always admitting to his wife what he's done, which is such an interesting twist on this kind of a movie where usually you have someone who's going it alone. He's not at all going it alone. And at first she says like, it's okay that you did that, but doesn't say that she would do something like that. And you get the sense that she's on a much higher moral level than he is. And then as the movie goes on, she corrupts him because she wants the money so badly and she wants her life to change. And she can't imagine just being a librarian's assistant for the rest of her life. I love that relationship between the two of them, and she plays it so perfectly. And it is wild to me that she doesn't act anymore. She's so good. But when you're the granddaughter of one of the most revered actors of all time and the daughter of a guy who people also like.
Yeah.
Wife to Danny Elfman, too, so probably doesn't need to.
Well, hold on. I have a lot to say about the Danny Elfman of it all. But, man, Danny Elfman's really gotten around.
Well, I loved the scene, and I was so absorbed and engrossed in the story again. I hadn't seen this movie in a really long time. Just like I said, remembered loving it, but I was so like kind of taken in with the story that I didn't even realize it until Hank, the Bill Paxton character, pointed it out. Gosh, she's kind of the smart one here. She's the brains here. She's like coming up with these plans and everything until he realizes like every plan you come up with ends with me murdering someone. Like, oh my God, he's right. Like everything she comes up with goes bad. Like everything goes wrong.
I think one of the funniest scenes in the movie, aside of Becky Ann Baker, is when they're in the hospital and they're presented with their baby for the first time. And then she's like, so anyways, you need to convince Lou that he's the one who killed the guy. I just was like, where did this come from?
And he's also like, be quiet. There are other people in this room. The most interesting thing, I have this movie at 4.5 stars, but I'm starting to think it might be a 5-star movie because the whole movie is told from his point of view, from Bill Paxton's point of view. And the coolest thing is that no one at the end of it is what he thought they were at the beginning. And the entire movie is him having to come to terms with that. So his wife is not who he thought she was. And the best scene in the movie, I know Jake agrees, and I bet Kevin at least could get on board, is when, so Hank needs Jacob to help him convince the drunk friend to say that he killed the farmer just so they can have it on tape and blackmail him. And Billy Bob Thornton gives the performance of his career. I'm watching the scene where you think he's going to turn on Hank the whole time, and then he twists it, and it turns out he's on Hank's side, and this was just his way into getting this confession. And you realize that Jacob is so much more than he appears. And that makes his situation so much more tragic and helps you understand why the climactic scene happens, because he's not just a dumbass. He's a smart person in this being that can't express that in any kind of normal way. He doesn't have any social skills, and he just wants a simple thing, no pun intended, which is the house that he grew up in and the farm that he grew up in, even though he has no idea how to handle that, and it ruined his father's life.
Well, he's never been with a woman. He's like, he's never even kissed a girl. He's
right.
Got that whole scene, which again is another heartbreaking scene. Yeah, he's got so many great scenes in this.
I do think, though, there is something where, like, Hank keeps saying, like, oh, but you'll be okay. You had that one girl that, like, 1 week in high school or something, and he keeps, like, hanging his hat on that to be like, oh, Jacob will be fine, and when things are all said and done.
Well, but then Jacob reveals that the only reason that girl was ever with him was because she was paid to be with him. It was a
right, and he
prank.
didn't know that.
Right, and that's another big reveal where this thing that Hank had believed the whole movie crumbles at the end. And then the next interaction that Hank and Jacob have together is the most tragic thing in the movie. And I think Raimi is also attracted to scenes like that. I was watching The Gift, which is another one of his like gothic type movies starring Cate Blanchett, where she's a psychic who gets caught up in this murder mystery. And there's this awful, like nasty subplot where Giovanni Ribisi also plays like a mentally ill guy who was sexually abused by his father his whole life growing up. And then like the effect that has on him in adulthood, it leads to a couple big scenes in the movie. Those two things reminded me of each other a lot, but it's done to much more depressing effect in A Simple Plan because of what it leads to. In fact, my only maybe complaint about the movie is Hank's reaction after he has to kill Jacob. I just wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced by like the Jacob, no. That didn't do it for me. But it's one shot in an amazing movie.
I was really nervous when I saw that Jacob had a dog, and I was like, if Jake assigned me this movie with no warning,
yeah,
end of friendship.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Raimi is not afraid to kill animals.
Absolutely not. So I was like, oh no, what's going to happen here?
Oh my God, I watched Drag Me to Hell, and that cat doesn't work out.
Not a good time.
Yeah, this movie's incredible. And it's pretty wild that, I mean, I guess the problem is he went from this to For the Love of the Game, and whoops, that didn't work out.
Sucked. And like I said, Brad, I said this to you. I love Kevin Costner in general. I love baseball movies. For the Love of the Game is terrible. Like, how can that movie be so bad?
I will say, right before this Jacob no scene that I didn't like was one of the coldest line deliveries. And I mean cold in like a badass line deliveries in the history of movies, where Gary Cole, who's been revealed as the person who is getting this money from a kidnapping ransom, he's there to kill everybody in town who gets in his way. And he's shot the sheriff. He's uncovered Hank's game, and he says, you know, you and I are about to have a lot of explaining to do. And Bill Paxton pulls up with his gun, goes, nope, just me, and blows him away. It is so cold. Bill Paxton is so cool. He's such a dweeb for this entire movie, and then he's so cool in this one shot, which is awesome. And then even that is subverted, because right after that, he has to do violence that destroys his soul. Oh, what a great movie.
His WTF is great, too. He has the most, like, normal guy who happens to act energy I've ever heard. And it's so sad. It's a shame he's gone. He seemed pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's absolutely the energy I had. I interviewed him once. I spent like 20, 25 minutes with him. But I mean, that was absolutely the energy that he gave off there too. He was just, he had a very normal guy, like, who's just happy to act. And it was I interviewed him for when he directed a movie. Actually, it was for the Greatest Game Ever Played, that golf movie he did with Shia LaBeouf. But, you know, we talked about A Simple Plan, and like we talked about Frailty. Honestly, he seemed like thrilled that I had like seen these movies and I could talk about them with him. Like, he was like excited to talk about The Greatest Game Ever Played. He's like, oh, well, you know, for this part of the movie, I was stealing from this, you know, like, because I love this director or that, or I was stealing from here, you know, like, just telling me about like the movies he watched and was influenced by. I interviewed a few people who were like, you know, bigger stars than him or whatever, but he was my favorite interview back in my former life as a film journalist.
He and Billy Bob Thornton seem like they were really good buds in real life. They did a few movies together, and I bet it's tough for Thornton that he's gone. Speaking of Thornton, that was my segue to get to this. When I was writing my review on Letterboxd for this movie, I was like, how did Thornton not get nominated for an Oscar for this? And then I found out he did, and he very much deserved it. Holy crap.
One above him.
Yeah, so I was about to say, so we talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago because James Coburn keeps coming up, and James Coburn essentially got his like Lifetime Achievement Award as his Best Supporting Actor award that year. And Jake told a funny anecdote about Coburn's reaction. Or was that his Oscar speech?
It wasn't his speech. I think it was like just in an interview at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, he said, I'm not often asked to act. I can act. It's just not often that I'm asked to.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, it should have gone to Thornton for this.
Well, and yeah, he's not been nominated since, because he was nominated for Best Actor for Sling Blade, which was a couple years before Simple Plan. But then, yeah, he hasn't been nominated since A Simple Plan.
And people really like his appearance in Tombstone, but there's not like
another Jim Jack produced movie.
There you go. But yeah, he's not brought it like this since then. I mean, I'm sure now he's just filthy rich, and what difference does it make?
Yeah, I mean, the only movie I would have said that off the top of my head that I can think of is I probably would have nominated him for Man Who Wasn't There that year.
I think he's boring in A Man Who Wasn't There.
I like it more.
You like it more?
Yeah, I ranked higher on my list, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, like I think Gandolfini is really the only one bringing not the only one. Like Scarlett Johansson's pretty good in there, and like a lot of the supporting characters are. And I don't even know if it's Thornton's fault, because the whole point of his character is that he's checked out. But he's checked out. That's not that interesting to me. Should we do our top 10s of 1998? Also, but before we get to our top 10s of 98, just want to make sure Billy Bob Thornton was the only Oscar nom from A Simple Plan, right?
Nope, one additional. It was nominated for the Best Adapted Screenplay.
Adapted.
Yes,
but not.
It's also a cool category. Adapted is really good. Don't poo-poo adapted.
Well, the writing awards are more interesting than pretty much any of the other awards. But
yeah, let me see who it lost to. It lost to this movie called Gods and Monsters.
Oh yeah, I remember.
I've heard of that, but I'm not seeing it.
I saw it like when it came out. I haven't seen it in a very long time. I remember it being good, very good. So I'm sure it's a fine winner, but it's not A Simple Plan.
In 1998, everybody was clamoring for Gods and Monsters. It was like one of those movies where this happens all the time. There's like the huge prestige movie. People know about it for 2 years, and then it's completely forgotten. All right, I'm going to go first. One honorable mention for... Well, actually, before I get to my honorable mentions, just one cool thing that happened in 1998 that I'm recognizing by looking at my longer list. A lot of big directors came out with their first feature this year. So you've got Christopher Nolan with Following. This was the year that came out. Darren Aronofsky with Pi. This is the year that came out. Both of those movies are in black and white. That's pretty cool. Guy Ritchie with Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Tamara Jenkins with Slums of Beverly Hills. It's like a crazy debut year for directors. Denis Villeneuve had his first feature this year with August 32nd on Earth.
That's awesome.
What was the popcorn bucket like for that film?
If I tell you what that film's about, you would have a hell of a time coming up with a popcorn bucket for it.
So how about that top 10, Brad?
Cool. So number 10 is Alfonso Cuarón's Great Expectations adaptation, starring Ethan Hawke, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Robert De Niro. I think this is great. It's got a great performance, too, from Anne Bancroft. This was, I think, maybe my introduction to Ethan Hawke. I'm not sure that I'd seen much from him before that. Gwyneth Paltrow, he's obsessed with her. That's what Great Expectations is about, pretty much. You get it by watching this movie. I thought it was very, very good. It's not like too fondly remembered, I would say, but I think it's wonderful. My number 9 is the aforementioned Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels by Guy Ritchie, about a bunch of friends who get in trouble. It's got a pre-iconic Jason Statham not being a badass, just like being a regular guy, which is pretty cool to watch in contrast. And it's one of the two. Like Guy Ritchie has 2 movies that are, I think, unassailable, and then a lot of movies that are very assailable. This is one of them. I love Lock, Stock. Number 8 is The Big Lebowski. I don't need to tell you what The Big Lebowski is about. Y'all have seen it or heard of it. You two in our group chat are constantly sending each other memes about The Big Lebowski. It's great, Coen Brothers.
You're welcome.
Number 7 is John McNaughton's Wild Things, which is a slimy noir, Southern noir, starring Kevin Bacon, Matt Dillon. We got a fun cameo from Bill Murray, and then very notably, Nev Campbell and Denise Richards doing things in this movie that high school me was very excited about. But it's also just like a cool, skeezy noir. Number 6 is The Prince of Egypt, which is actually very timely. We're recording this 2 days before Passover begins. But it's the story of Moses' exodus from Egypt, told in DreamWorks fashion. Simon Wells and Steve Hickner directed this, but this is a Jeffrey Katzenberg movie. It's good. It's real good. We talked about this in our 10 Commandments episode. If you want to hear us talk more about that, go back and listen to that. Number 5 is Out of Sight, one of my favorite Steven Soderbergh movies, another heist movie. This one starring George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. Yeah, it's great. Soderbergh was like in a real, like, I'm cool, I'm slick, I'm going to make these really polished movies in the late 90s. He's not doing that anymore. Now he's making stuff on his iPhone, but I still like his movies, but this one was very cool. Number 4 is Pleasantville, Gary Ross's Pleasantville, which is a cute movie about people learning more about themselves by getting sucked into a TV show, basically, starring Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon. Great performance by Joan Allen in here, and a really nasty but good performance by J.T. Walsh.
One of the great character actors of all time.
For sure.
He's also classed up everything he was in.
My number 3, I've seen people deride this movie a lot lately, but I think it's just because Twitter is deranged, but it's Tony Kaye's American History X. I think this movie's fantastic. Ed Norton and Ed Furlong are skinheads. Ed Norton goes to jail, comes out, and tries to get his brother out of the skinheads. It's like, I think the last serious performance by Beverly D'Angelo, like the last real movie she was ever in. It's got a good, really scary performance by Ethan Suplee. Elliot Gould as the Jewish guy in it. It's good. Number 2 is The Truman Show, Peter Weir's masterpiece about a guy who's been spied on his whole life by the entire world. This is like such an interesting derealization, depersonalization exercise if you're familiar with either of those conditions. If you have either of those conditions, I don't recommend watching it. It's great. It's sweet, beloved for a reason. And then number 1 is A Simple Plan.
All right, so I'm going to preface this by saying I have not seen a lot of 1998 movies. My first 3 are movies I haven't even seen since 1998. But number 10, I have Small Soldiers. I remember liking that as a kid. That's probably one that will not hold up on rewatch, but it's got some pretty funny people in it. You know, Dave Foley, Phil Harbin. Number 9, I have Ants.
I saw that. Ants. Ants is good.
Ants is
I like
great.
Ants too.
Maybe cold take, but I like it better than A Bug's Life. I saw it in theater, really enjoyed it.
I think they're comparable. I think they're pretty close. Yeah.
I would say
mean,
it's pretty close.
It's not crazy better, but I remember just liking it more. Number 8, I have Mulan. You know, great music, good story, fun visuals, kind of very different for Disney at the time. Number 7, I have Slums of Beverly Hills. Very, very fun movie. We talked about it all this episode. Number 6, I have The Truman Show. It's very funny looking at this through lenses now when like people willingly put their whole lives on the internet now through video and pictures and stuff. Number 5 is Rushmore. I'm probably the biggest Wes Anderson fan on this call. I think some people think this is his first film because nobody saw Bottle Rocket. I really like Bottle Rocket, but
I've seen Bottle Rocket. I've seen the Bottle Rocket short.
It's great. It's an awesome movie. I actually like it better than Rushmore, but that's where it lands on this list.
I like Bottle Rocket more than Rushmore too.
Number 4, I have A Simple Plan, and that's really it's honestly it's probably maybe you could say it's better than my top 3, but my top 3 are like this hardened and amber because of time thing. Number 3, if you thought we weren't going to talk about wrestling, you're wrong. I have Hitman Hart, Wrestling with Shadows, the Paul J documentary covering the last 5 months of Bret Hart's WWF career. Iconic film if you're a wrestling fan.
Proves that the Montreal Screwjob was a work.
Some say.
Scott Hall says.
Number 2 is The Big Lebowski, just one of the all-time great comedy movies, a fantastic film. And number 1, if Big Lebowski is a great comedy, this is one of my all-time favorite movies, Dirty Work, directed by Bob Saget, Norm Macdonald's lead. It is. I thought about this anytime I talk to somebody about Clue. I say, which is one of my favorite films, I say every single thing Michael McKean does in that movie is funny. Whether it's a line he says or an action he does, it's funny. There's 4 characters in Dirty Work where that is. And it's a movie my brother bought on a whim and Blockbuster and the previously viewed bin. And I've watched it over and over again. It's tremendous. So
I hate Dirty Work.
I love it. I'm glad. That's my number 1. Do you hate it?
I hate it.
So that's my top 10. Jake.
Yeah, never did Dirty Work. I'm just gonna toss out a couple of honorable mentions just because they're things that we've talked about on this episode. Gods and Monsters, the aforementioned, is an honorable mention. Mulan, which is on Kevin's list, that's an honorable mention. The Affliction, for which James Coburn won his Oscar, that's an honorable mention for me. And then also, we haven't mentioned it, but the Best Picture winner from that year that people hate on because it beat Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare in Love, is an honorable mention for me that year as well. Now to get to the top 10, the other Queen Elizabeth movie from that year, Elizabeth, which is Cate Blanchett's breakout role. That's my number 10. She's amazing in it. My number 9 is John Boorman's The General, black and white movies with Brendan Gleeson and Jon Voight. That's just awesome.
My number 11.
Yeah, I do. I remembered that you liked it too. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, just real quick. So Gleason plays Irish, right? Yeah, Irish gang leader. It's like The Departed before The Departed, but really suburban, sitting on your sofa kind of guys. Just everyone's fat and angry. It's really good.
Very cool. It's one I didn't see until very recently, and I had to, within the last couple of years, I had to update my list for it. My number 8 is the Alex Proyas film Dark City. I think if you actually watched this,
I wish that I had seen this more recently so I could have a letterbox rating for it. This movie's so cool.
Very cool. And you can even see when you because I've watched the Matrix films recently, because I rewatched the 3 Matrix movies before the shitty 4th one came out, and guess what, 2 and 3 are still bad too. But if some of the stuff from the Matrix is I'm not gonna say they stole from Dark City or they didn't have their ideas, but it's reminiscent of Dark City. Some of the stuff in the Matrix is very similar to some of the ideas that are out there in Dark City, and Dark City just looks really cool. The set designs and how the film looks, everything's really cool. And I know it's popular in certain circles, but I still think it's maybe a little bit underseen on the whole. My number 7 is Mike Newell's Primary Colors, with John Travolta doing a very thinly veiled Bill Clinton impression. Actually, a pretty good movie, well acted. It's got him, Emma Thompson, Kathy Bates, Oscar nominated for it. Very, very good. My number 6 is Soderbergh's Out of Sight. Brad said a lot about it, but yeah, George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez, they're hot. Great movie, well made. I mean, really, really cool. My top 5. These are all near or all-timers for me. I could maybe order these in some different ways. This is the way that I have them right now. But yeah, these top 5 are all just amazing. Right now I have number 5 as A Simple Plan, which, we've talked about a lot. Just an outstanding movie. My number 4, Brad, this is on your list, is Pleasantville. Movie just makes me smile, makes me feel good. The performances you mentioned are all great. Also, Jeff Daniels, William H. Macy, great in this. Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire are also terrific. And Don Knotts is a nice little extended cameo, I guess. He's not in a lot of it, but it's a nice little part. My number 3, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. I love this movie. I love Terrence Malick. I do remember it got me in a lot of trouble with my high school girlfriend. I made her see it with me and she was very mad. So I had to go see romantic comedies for 4 months after this. I saw Hope Floats and everything with Drew Barrymore, and it was a rough time.
And You've Got Mail, right? I feel like that was part of it. We've talked about.
Yep. You've Got Mail was definitely around that time too, but I kind of like that one.
So I had it in my head that you had given me The Thin Red Line for this podcast. And so I haven't been watching it. I've been avoiding it on purpose, but now I see that that's not the case. So I'll just go watch that.
Maybe I did at first, but then I switched to A Simple Plan because I definitely think you'd like it more. So that might be.
Have either of you seen the sketch show Birthday Boys on IFC? Probably not. No one did.
No.
There's a great sketch where one guy's like, "Hey, have you guys seen Hope Floats?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's nothing to write home about." And he gets all sad, and you realize he literally has written a letter home to his parents telling them about Hope Floats. Good.
That's a good TikTok skit.
Then my number 2, Joel and Ethan Coen's The Big Lebowski. I adore this movie. I've seen it like 100 times. I could probably quote it line by line. And then my number one, as Brad said, is the masterpiece by Peter Weir, The Truman Show. I just love everything about that movie.
Pleasantville is, I think, a movie I saw maybe in school, but I can't remember exactly. So, like, I'm not going to put that on a list. But
I'm surprised, like, when you say, like, oh, I haven't seen these since 1998, I'm like, so Jake had a similar thing when we did our 1979 list. He just, because he didn't have 10 movies that he liked, he had movies he didn't like on the list.
That's very
And I was
funny.
like, is that what's about to happen?
No. I do remember is that the Fiona Apple does the cover of Across the Universe, and that video is also in the setting of that. It's very fun.
Fiona Apple was awesome.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Kevin, I don't know, plug some stuff. What do you want?
I'll just plug two other podcasts. Well, first of all, you can follow me on Letterboxd. I think it's K413.
I wish
And
you'd
then
update more.
I know I should. Well, I didn't put these two movies on there because I didn't want to spoil for you both. So I did a podcast about the TV show Lost. It's called From Broadcast Step. It's all done. We did all the episodes plus like the alternate reality game, the video game, the tie-in novel. Me and my good friend Ben Lundy did all that. That's all complete in there. And then Brad and I have our Adventure Time podcast, Slooping the Pig. We did with our friend Justin Houston all of the Cartoon Network run, the Distant Lands HBO Max series, the Fiona and Cake Max series, and we'll do season 2 whenever that comes out, and maybe some other fun stuff we've talked about and then quickly abandoned.
Yeah, like comic books that were not important to the series at all.
Well, but there was also some other stuff we were going to do in like between the two Fiona and Cakes that I think Never Did It Consumed Your Life, which is fine. It's a great podcast.
Never Did It's kind of taken over, but I'm still down to do an Over the Garden Wall miniseries for sure.
But go listen to all those, and we'll 100% be back with that. That's Floop and the Pig, wherever you find this podcast too.
If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list.
We have a Facebook page now as well. You can check that out at facebook.com/Never Did It podcast. I'll be posting on that with new episodes and just fun updates from time to time about what we're watching and what's coming up.
So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.